Okay, so week 2. If you weren't here, at the top of the sheet that says 9/11 on it, and it is 9/11 today, has the link on the website to where the video is, but also the handout. And then what I did too is I converted the slides into like an outline. So it doesn't look like the slides, but it has all the information the slides had, and that'll be on there too. And so each week I'll just load it to that link, so if you miss a week, or if you just can't, everybody likes to write everything down. You're not going to be able to do it, I'm telling you right now, especially today. So, but at least you know you can go back, you can watch it again, or you can print out the thing. Hopefully it'll always be up within a day or two. So that's where you can find that. We began last week with some basic material, some foundational material about how we want to study the Exodus. So it wasn't even a survey of the Exodus as much as it was an approach to how we're going to go about studying this book from the Old Testament. And so with that regard, before we get kicked off here, is there any thoughts or comments on last week or questions that your mind might have been thinking about since then? All right. Well, you'll have an opportunity because here will be a few review slides. So Deuteronomy 18 says, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own brothers, and you must listen to him." And then in verse 18, "I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him." So this is to Moses. Of course, the Exodus is, Moses is the deliverer in the book of Exodus, and here we have in Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book of our Bible that Moses wrote, a prediction that somebody will come in the same idea or spirit of Moses, but he'll be a greater Moses. And so these verses show us that the book of Exodus is pointing to something greater. So the people would be on the lookout for a new Moses, a better Moses, a greater Moses. And we looked at some of these ideas throughout the Bible and how the New Testament interprets many of the characters in the Old Testament. So in Romans, Jesus is portrayed as the better and greater Adam. And that's just explicit. In John 8, Jesus is better and greater than Abraham. In John 4:12, the question to Jesus, "Are you greater than our father Jacob?" The answer is implied by what he does. Hebrews 3, we have a better mediator than Moses. Matthew 12:42, one greater than Solomon is here. And so we see a paradigm in the New Testament that does point us back to say, look at these Old Testament characters and see how they're pointing forward to Christ, both in a comparison of them and in a contrast to them. And it's so often the comparison will draw our attention to the character, but the contrast shows us how Jesus Christ is greater, because usually a character will have a failure, and we know Christ doesn't. And so that shows us how he's the greater. The book of Hebrews, of course, everything is pointing to Christ. Well, 1 Corinthians 10 specifically really tells us how to view the Exodus. "For I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea," that being the pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire, passed through the Red Sea. These are all allusions back to the Exodus. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food, all drank the same spiritual drink. So manna provided for them every day, water from the rock. And that rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. Now these things happened as examples for us, so that we would not crave evil things as they also craved. And of course, a reflection on the idols that they were seeking out after. So this says examples. The previous slide was just showing how Paul spiritualizes what happened in the Exodus. Talking about spiritual food, spiritual drink. Of course, Jesus Christ gives us living waters. Jesus Christ is the bread come down from heaven. The rock was Christ. So these real events, these historical events, we don't question that, but they're pointing to greater things. There's more than history being presented through the history. And then lastly, as we sum up last week, where God himself in the book of Exodus says, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I've heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings and have come down to deliver them. And at the beginning of the Ten Commandments, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. God is showing his heart toward his people. He hears our cries. He is a deliverer. He provides us with the deliverer. Our prayers don't go on deaf ears. He hears us. And that's an important part of the Exodus. And all this leads us to worship. Let my people go that they will serve me in the wilderness, a word for worship, repeated over and over and over. We're delivered out of our bondage and slavery to sin and death and into worship God, not to just do whatever we want. And so these were the six points that I said last week on what I'm pointing us to and why we study the Exodus. It all points us to Christ. It serves as a paradigm for the Christian life. It's an example for us. It shows us what's pleasing to God in the law. It reminds us of God's faithfulness with people and what the appropriate response to that is worship. So as we study the Exodus, these are 6 things that are on my mind. Of course, there's a lot more reasons than that why we would study this book. But the point I'm trying to make is it's very relevant for today. So now with that summary, was there any questions or thoughts on that? All right.
This is
Yeah.
very helpful because I've never seen those parallels and the compare and contrast idea that you covered last time. And to see Christ through the Old Testament as well as the New.
Yeah.
And
It's beautiful, isn't it?
it is.
To see how God wrote his word and crafted events and brought about history in such a way that it would point to himself. What we're going to see today is we're going to start with the book of Exodus, but we're going to see how it's linked back with the book of Genesis. So we're going to see a lot of comparisons as we do this. All right, so Exodus 1, and if you have your Bibles, it's good to be in them. And if not, the verses will be up on the screen. I don't know, can you guys see the screen? Is the font the right size? More or less? Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with his household: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All the persons who came from the loins of Jacob were 70 in number, but Joseph was already in Egypt. So it seems like it's just kind of a summary statement to enter us into the book, and it is. This is going to connect us back with Genesis. Actually, this is like Genesis part 2. But what's the significance of the number 70 here?
It is a small remnant that into the promise that the people at Genesis. Genesis is the book of election. People were called people. So the redemption and Exodus. So those were the original that actually went in under Joseph.
And it's good because the next verses are going to say how big they've become. So like you said, from that small group of 70, we're going to have a whole nation. In particular, the number 70 is commentators will tell us is pretty significant. And this is a little complicated, but I think we'll get it. Also, by the way, Genesis 46:27. So right at the end of the book of Genesis, it has a very similar statement talking about 70. So Genesis kind of ends with this, and Exodus begins with it. And I think that probably how that goes. Before we answer about the 70, let's look at this passage from Deuteronomy. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of all generations. Ask your father, and he will inform you. Your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of man, he set the boundaries of the peoples, according to the number of the sons of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the allotment of his inheritance. This is an odd, verse 8 is odd. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, he separated the sons of man according to the number of the sons of Israel. And so he's talking about the whole world, all the nations, somehow being categorized or grouped in such a way that it would relate to the sons of Israel. And so, very more specifically, where that happens is in Genesis 10 and 11. 32. These are the clans. So Genesis 10, after Noah, talks about the sons of Noah, and then it starts listing all the people that came from the sons of Noah, just like the Exodus lists all the people that came from Jacob, right? When you add them up, there's 70. And it's talking about, and from these the nations spread abroad on the earth after the flood. And so somehow this is grouped into 70 nations. And then, of course, the next scene is Babel, and from Babel they are actually scattered after Babel, aren't they? All right, so this Deuteronomy passage is linking the two. He gave the nations their inheritance, and he separated the sons of men. He set the boundaries of the people, how? According to the numbers of sons of Israel. In other words, the number of the sons of one nation, Israel, being 70, will determine the allotment for 70 nations. What do you kind of learn from that? I know it's complicated.
God's plan had already established what their boundaries and land would be, and it would be large enough to hold all of the people for the future generations.
Yes. But also, how special is Israel in the eyes of God's people, in the eyes of God? That the entire 70, in other words, remember, they're like the smallest. And yet their people will determine all the other nations. Anyhow, that's a significant portion of the number 70. Interesting point here, Luke 10. Now after this, the Lord appointed 70 others, and he sent them in pairs ahead of him to every city and place. A lot of translations say 72. Commentators say the best manuscripts, the oldest manuscripts, have the word 70. And so here you have something going on in the New Testament where Jesus Christ sent 70 out. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out the laborers into the harvest. At the end, this will make more sense when we talk about the Great Commission and what Israel was supposed to do and what we as Christians are supposed to do.
I never saw that in that verse before, that he sent them ahead of him to every city and place where he himself was going to come.
It's kind of cool how he laid the groundwork. And was it the nation of Israel called to be doing that? All the nations of the world are supposed to be looking at Israel. They're supposed to be a blessing to Israel, and then we'll look at the Abrahamic covenant, from your seed all the nations will be blessed. Okay. So we have a little bit of a connection here between Genesis and Exodus, no doubt. Genesis begins with a view, all of humanity in view through Adam, whereas Exodus begins with Israel in view through Jacob. Missed something there, but we'll get it back. Eventually, Exodus is going to focus on Abraham and his family. Abraham hits the scene in Genesis 12, and then him and his family, the patriarchs, go all the way up to chapter 50. Eventually, the Exodus is going to focus on Moses and his family, or the children of Israel, which is represents. Abraham has 2 siblings, and Moses has 2 siblings. Abraham's called to leave his home and travel to a foreign land, and Moses is forced to leave his home and travel to a foreign land. And we already talked about the 70. So the idea of nations consolidating in Abraham, and then the nation of Israel calling them to go out. So back to the text. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers, this is Genesis 47. Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. This is the end of Genesis, telling us how they got to, how we got to the Exodus, how they get to Egypt. Let them live in the land of Goshen, and if you know any capable men among them, then put them in charge of my livestock. Now Israel lived in the land of Egypt and Goshen, and they acquired property in it, and were fruitful, and became very numerous. Does anything jump out, anything strike you as interesting about this telling at the end of Genesis here?
A lot of people always thought that they were under strong bondage and slavery and stuff, but they actually flourished when they first went in. Of course, Joseph was still, further things changed, but yeah, they flourished in the great nation. Again, after they 70 people along the banks of the Nile.
So they get the best of the land. Let's see, I think I highlighted some of this, yeah. They get the best of the land. They're placed in charge of the livestock. They were fruitful and became numerous. Does that ring any bells to something we've heard before? Speaking of ringing bells. Let's compare Genesis 1 with Genesis 47. So the beginning of Genesis to the end of Genesis, right? Kind of bookends. The beginning of Genesis, they're in the Garden of Eden, and in Genesis 47, the people are in the land of Goshen, which is described as the most lush, gardenous place in all of Egypt. Both are explained as the best of the land. That's exactly what's used about the Goshen. You know, it's good for crops, it was good for livestock. God puts man in the garden, and Pharaoh, which in Egyptian terms is a god. I mean, Pharaoh is viewed as a god. He puts Israel in Goshen. Man is called to cultivate the land and have dominion over God's animals, and in Genesis 47, the land is at Israel's disposal. It's what it says, and are called to have dominion over Pharaoh's cattle. In Genesis 1, they're told to be fruitful and multiply, and here in Genesis 47, it says that they are fruitful and became very numerous. You see some parallels. What does that tell you? What's the point? Is it just interesting, or does it kind of lead us to, is the text trying to lead us to think something? Well, let me ask you this, what happens after this? Fall, right? So if you're reading this and you're hearing this, what can you expect is going to happen? You're going to get kicked out of the garden, right? We did that. Okay. Exodus 1, 6 and 7. Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation, but the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. So this is intentional. Remember, Moses wrote both books. He's using the same words for a reason. Fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied, so that the land was filled with them. Well, in Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. It's what it's telling you. So there's a connection there. But now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will multiply. And in the event of war, they will also join themselves to those who hate us, and fight against us and depart from the land. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied, the more they spread out, so that they were in dread of the sons of Israel. The Egyptians compelled the sons of Israel to labor rigorously, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and bricks, and at all kinds of labor in the fields, all their labors which they rigorously imposed on them. We're going to go back through this. So why do the Egyptians not like the Israelites?
They didn't go to Zadik, they were afraid of it.
I think it's deeper than that. If you look, everywhere Israel goes, or everywhere a Jew goes, you got a problem. I mean, you look through history, that's true, that's true. You got,
There was a different group of people that came in and took on the Egyptians, and then after they were forced to run out, the Egyptians continued to suffer on the people
right, and so that there was,
They were high side.
in the middle of this history, another Semitic group had come into Egypt. And so the Jews were associated with them. It would probably be similar to like if a South American country had done something, how people all view the South American countries as all the same. You know, if you're from South Florida, you know better because you never call, you know, somebody from Puerto Rico a Cuban. You just wouldn't do that. They'll let you know, or vice versa. So, but the same thing's kind of going on. They've had Egypt's been fighting people, had invaders, and of the same sort of background as the Jewish people, so Semitic tribes. What about being shepherds? If you go back to Genesis 46, I don't think I have it in the thing, so we can look at it. So the end of Genesis really kind of answers a lot of questions for us. Genesis 46, verses 33 and 34. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? So Joseph is telling, he brought his family there now. He's telling them what to tell Pharaoh. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen. Both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is abomination of the Egyptians. So Joseph tells them what to say to get the best land. So Pharaoh wants to reward Joseph because Joseph saves not only Egypt but the whole world and has an economic boom. And so bring your family. Well, look, Pharaoh, we're all shepherds and you guys hate us. You hate shepherds, so can we have that land over there? Yeah, go to that land. It's great pastures and beautiful land. But that kind of gives you a clue that shepherds are an abomination. So these people are viewed as dirty. The Jewish people are viewed as dirty to the Egyptians. The land of Goshen is just prime real estate.
The other part too, if they were just, if they were farmers and took care of cattle, that's gonna be very different from sheep. Out west, they had a lot of problems with in the United States. People that raised cattle hated to see people coming in with sheep because the sheep ate the grass down to the nub.
Okay. So that would be more tension. Religious differences, of course. And past resentment. What do I mean about that? What do you know about Joseph's economic plan? So if you remember the story, right? The whole Pharaoh has these dreams. Joseph's in prison. He's the only one that can answer the dreams. So they call Joseph up out of prison. The dreams have this, Joseph interprets them by the Spirit of God to say, we are going to have 7 years of plenty and then 7 lean years. And Pharaoh says, well, what would you do about this? And he says, well, let's store up all this, the grain, produce and store it up, and then that'll sustain us through the years of want. And so Pharaoh's pleased with this. He appoints Joseph to his right hand, and Joseph is the economic advisor to Pharaoh. He's actually the ruler because he's gotten all the authority from him. Well, in those lean years, all the nations are coming to Egypt because they're the only ones with stuff, right? Grain, corn, whatever they had. Well, even the Egyptian people who are starving, they have to distribute this. So this is what it says in Genesis 47:20 to 26. So Joseph, gotta go before that probably. We'll go to 13 actually. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they bought. People spent everything they had on food. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone. Joseph answered, give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said, we will not hide from my lord that money that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my Lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my Lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for all the Egyptians sold their fields, because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made them servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Basically slavery. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore they did not sell their land. And Joseph said to the people, behold, I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Bought you. Now here's a seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the food, field as food for yourselves and your household. And they said, you have saved our lives, may it please the Lord, and we will be servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph made a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day that Pharaoh should have a fifth, the land of the priests alone become Pharaoh's. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the Egyptians were stripped of every possession they had. But the Jewish people, they got everything. I mean, they got land, they got their own stuff. Well, put a couple of centuries past you, and resentment continues to, again, then a Pharaoh arose that did not know Joseph. They don't care about how they got in that boat. All they know is they're Egyptian people. Where's theirs? And then they look at the Jewish people that are just living it up, like Kerry said. So there's a lot of reasons that the Egyptians were upset with the Israelites. And then, of course, I think somebody said it, but also, I mean, they became their labor force. So they wanted to build cities, and now they got people to do it. So some questions. Because we always want to identify with the Jews, the Israelites, as the church. Oh, we're persecuted. Oh, I know. But the hatred the Egyptians had for the Jewish people, makes me want to examine it. There are groups of people that we don't like. Because they're cultural, religious, racial, or socioeconomic differences. When people groups are different and they're dwelling among each other, there's tension. And I think we got to examine our own hearts in these things. Probably don't want to speak out loud on that, but is there any thoughts or questions on it?
Politicians.
You're right. They're preying. They're right. You're right. They're preying on these differences, causing a lot of problems. All right. And how have past sins in America hurt us in the present? And whatever we want to say about racial tensions now, they all go back to slavery in the past. I'm not excusing behaviors now. I'm just saying there is a connection. The same way in the Exodus, Joseph's economic plan that saved Egypt brings the Israelites problems hundreds of years later. So, tough stuff to think about, I know. But let's look more about how this is constructed. Okay, now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know the people. Again, we read this, but let's read it again and listen for some key words. He said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will multiply in the event of a war. They will also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh storage cities, Pithom and Ramses. So look at some key words I'm going to highlight. Behold the people. Come, let us. In the building of cities. Does any of that ring a bell? Something back in Genesis. Let's see some more. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied, the more they spread out. So they were in dread of the sons of Israel. The Egyptians compelled the sons of Israel to labor rigorously, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and bricks, and all kinds of labor in the field, all their labors which they rigorously imposed on them. Now this seems innocuous enough, like how can you compare this to Babel, but let's see. So at the end of the Noah account, which is chapter 9, Noah's people are told to be fruitful and multiply. And here, right away, we were told that they were fruitful and multiplied and filled the earth. Again, we talked about the 70 nations. That's right after the Noah account, because those are from the sons of Noah. Okay, so then coming out of the Noah account, the people settle in Babel, and here people are settled in Egypt. God observed, so when you go to that Babel account that we're not going to read, but you can look at it, he says these same words. Behold, they are one people, and here we hear, behold, the people. The people were building a city. Pharaoh forces the people to build cities. Brick and mortar, virtually the only place in the Old Testament you see those words are in these two accounts. And so, again, what is the end result of the Babel account? Yeah, God drove them out and then scattered them, right? So can we expect, if you see these patterns, that that's what's coming? Is it possible that Moses, as a writer, is trying to communicate that by word art, by literature, in the way he's telling the history? Hebrews would get this. They're hearing the same words. The Hebrew language is very intentional about that. And again, they are much better at word pictures than we are because they don't have TVs. So they're much better at hearing stories and telling stories in such a way that it paints pictures. And as we study this course, and as I teach you other classes, what I hope to show you is that readers are not trying to give you just information. They're trying, by the telling of their stories, real history, never questioning that, but by the way they tell them, to lead you to come to a conclusion. And so if this holds, then we could expect that they're going to be driven out. That's what's coming. So Genesis, what next? God will send the people out of Babel, and we know that God will send the people out of Egypt. In Exodus, God chooses a representative, a man. Enter Abraham. Right after the Babel story, you get Abraham. Right after this account in Exodus, right here, you get Moses. Abraham is forced to, right as soon as you get Abraham, he's forced to leave his home. Where does he go but Egypt, of all places? But he comes back. Moses is forced to leave his home, which is Egypt. But again, if we're tracking with the story, we know he'll be back to deliver his people. God brings Abraham and his family into the wilderness, and God is going to bring Moses and his family into the wilderness. And then the Abrahamic covenant is given. So if we're tracking with the story, we expect a covenant from our covenant God to this new mediator, bringing it to Mosaic covenant. Any thoughts or questions? Are you seeing this stuff? You know, the biblical accounts? This is the Abrahamic covenant. It's found in this is Genesis 12:1-3, but you can see other accounts. It's in Genesis 18 and again in 17. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse." We're not going to see that in the Exodus with the plagues. "And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." Why? What? In relation to the book of Exodus, why am I taking us back to the Genesis Abrahamic covenant and highlighting these sections? Genesis, we all think it's a great ending to Genesis. But if we're a student of the Bible, that should leave us in attention. What about this promise? They're not dwelling in the land. They're not being a blessing to the people. As a matter of fact, they basically cursed the Egyptians. And God is a God of covenant. And this covenant has not been fulfilled. And so God's going to bring about this covenant, which is going to be uncomfortable to his people, is it not? They had to be in slavery to get them out. What do we learn about this from God's plans and his promises and how he works with and in his people and how he works with and in his people's enemies?
Whose plans are perfect?
All his plans to solve the people's and it's also his time. His plan always operate his time. He comes through promises, they believe promises that offers and says do.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
think
go.
also this covenant protects his people. I mean, you're looking at, he's separated his people from the rest of the world, and that they are the delegates for his word to go out. And so therefore, his covenant is not known unless his people are convinced. So, as they go forth from here, through the trials, his word will go forth. He's established that, he's put his people where he needs them to be.
And who brought the people of Egypt, essentially? When you look at the Joseph story, how God orchestrated it, I mean, that God, sovereignty, we're all saying that. So he's the one who brought them into Egypt, you know, for a time. But bringing them out is going to be uncomfortable. But he's true to his people and he's true to his plans. And he's going to bring these things about. And that's the tension that we have at the beginning here of the Exodus. So things were good, but there's a birth process. We're going to see that in a few classes too, to get this nation out. And the birth process is not a comfortable process. And putting these people in slavery and bondage and crying out to God is teaching them something. And we're going to see how all this works together. So is God making you uncomfortable to move you into his will? Was it his plan for them to be in Egypt long term? We already answered the second one. You know, the trials we face in our lives are ordained by God. It doesn't excuse the people that may be bringing them into our lives if there's sin involved. That's never the case. But God is in control of these things. And if you are his child, you are his people, we have the promise of God to rest on. Romans 8. Go there.
I think the hard thing living in the U.S. in the 21st century, you know, we read the first chapter of Genesis and 200 years of history and verses, and we can see, okay, God kept his covenant, and it's hard for us in our individualistic minds to imagine being one of those Israelites, living, you know, wait, God's keeping the promises, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because they're all dying. It's not, you know,
They're
these
dying.
promises to the nation are only going to be fulfilled in a generation, so everybody's, you know, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it's not, yeah. Some people will be, some of God's children will be cured of cancer. Some will not. But he's still sovereign, he still loves us, and there's a better. So the main connection I want to make from this, so in Exodus 1, again, it's showing how the Jewish people were fruitful and multiplied and were basically filled the land. They didn't fill the earth, they filled the land. That's what's known as the cultural mandate or the creation mandate. It's something, it's God creates man and woman and he gives them this mandate. And we see it repeated over and over and over and over and over. Okay? Very specifically, the flood, he repeats to Noah and his sons as they come out of the ark the same exact thing he tells Adam and Eve. The flood is a recreation story. So here in the Exodus, bringing that back to us. Okay? Be fruitful and multiply, fill and subdue the earth. I'm connecting that with the Abrahamic covenant because the connection I'd like to make is in doing this, it should be accomplishing this. And you shall be a blessing, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Because when the cultural mandate is given, it's God created man and woman in what? In his image. And then he says, go image me forth, i.e. be fruitful, multiply, fill and subdue the earth. That's what he's saying. And so to image forth God, we ought to be blessed, be a blessing, right? And the Jewish people may have been fruitful and multiply, but they certainly hadn't filled the earth. And by the way, what's the sin of Babel? Everybody thinks it's the building of the tower. They didn't fill and subdue the earth. This is the first part. When you read that story about Babel, it's they came to, they're like, yeah, let's stay here. Let's stop moving around and make for ourselves a city. And so God said, well, you're not going to fill and subdue the earth. I'm going to spread you out. You know. But what about for the Christian? Well, the cultural mandate is connected to, in the New Covenant, to the Great Commission. It's basically the same thing. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit, in the name of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. That is being fruitful and multiplying and filling the earth. As you're making disciples, you're being fruitful and you're multiplying. That's what most theologians would associate back to that cultural mandate in Christ. In Acts 1, this is also connected to the Great Commission. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be my witnesses both in Jerusalem and in Judea and all Samaria and to the ends of the most part of it. We are called to go out to fill the earth. You know? And so God is going to do that in the Exodus by bringing them out. In this case, he doesn't want them to fill the earth, because what's going to happen, and we see this as a fulfillment of this in Solomon, because they are called to be the light of the world as a nation, the earth is going to come to them. And that's why in Solomon you have the Queen Sheba coming, and all these people, all the nations are coming to see the light of the world. It's a beautiful picture of what the church is supposed to be. So, to connect this to America, I think, that's probably my last slide. You know, I don't like to think that the glory days of America are over, but I think we all have to admit that things have changed. Things have changed, and it is sad. I get it. But could it be that God is not positioning this church to be greater light and salt in the world? Because is it possible that we the church, got too comfortable in 20th century, 21st century, first world America, staying to ourselves, not reaching out, letting the culture influence us like Babylon, which is a newer Egypt, you know. And so, and I think we're having some growing pains. No, we're not slaves. Yes, we speak about persecution, but if you look at the persecution around the world, we ain't seen nothing. But if that comes, we have the faith and confidence that God is sovereign and his kingdom will come and his promises are there. And what are we called to be but light and salt now to our neighbors, to our friends, to our coworkers? That is this class. Any thoughts or questions?
I was thinking about, especially towards, well, in the Old Testament, I think where he says, for my name's sake. And that was kind of ringing through all these things and all his working and all. Yes, he loves us, but why is he doing all that he's doing?
For his name, it's good. Yeah, and it's his plan.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, good.
To answer that, we just studied John, it's for his glory, right? So, the death of Christ coming is for his glory. You know, all these things are building so that his glory may be known throughout all the earth. And I think, you know, what we call the birthing process is happening all through the whole. I mean, Jeremiah, he said, I will put this on their hearts so that they may know you. I think, you know, that's.
And he's gonna have that showdown with Pharaoh, by
Yeah.
the way, where, and you will know that I am the Lord. We do have to go because it's choir practice, so everybody has to stay for choir practice.